So yeah, we'll just wait another minute here. Once we get to the 12 o'clock, we'll go Facebook Live and start with another Hoosier Birders Hour. Thanks to folks that have already joined in here. As we do every month, if you happen to have questions, whether they're about this month's theme or not, feel free to, you can put them in the chat, or you can feel free to just kind of raise your hand and even ask it, kind of try to be informal each month as we're kind of chatting about each month's topic. And I think this is a topic that's got a lot of wide appeal. So I think folks will either watching here on Facebook Live or catching the recording here in a little bit. I'll just wait just a quick second here. Also, while we wait, there used to be a study done on bird watching demographics and what made a bird watcher, and it was done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, done every decade, and it looked at visitation at like fish and wildlife areas. And one of the criteria for being a bird watcher or a birder, it was said to be that you could you travel at least 10 or 15 miles from your home to look at birds. So is if you've gone to a state park maybe to go on a bird walk, or you visited Jasper, Pulaski to see the cranes, check you're a bird watcher, whether you admit to it or not. And the second definition I saw was that you can actively identify bird species around your own home. So instead of travel, just from your own house, if you know the different kind of bird species. And right away, I asked folks, anyone know what kind of hummingbird you got? And almost everybody knows our hummingbird. And so I said, look at that. If you know that, the hummingbird that's coming to your yard, you are a bird watcher. And so with that, you become amongst an army of like 20 to 40 million people in the United States, they say, that are bird watchers. And today we got a few of them that are joining us here on our Hoosier Birders Hour. And Whitney, looks like we're on Facebook Live, correct? We are live and going. So I want to welcome everyone to our annual get-together, monthly get-together, kind of chat about different topics birding in Indiana. My name is Brad Bumgardner. I am the executive director for Indiana Audubon. Want to thank also Whitney Yorger, who's kind of in the background as our communications and outreach manager. And she'll be sending you some of the links and intercepting some of the questions if you happen to have them today, whether you're in the Zoom or on that Facebook Live. We encourage you to ask any questions. We'll have some different opportunities too for you guys to give some comments throughout the hour, because it's definitely an interesting topic that's got a wide appeal for very many people. And but before we get started, I just want to mention a couple updates as we kind of do each month. And one of them is I was just thinking here this morning, like, man, summer is flying fast, super fast. I was out walking some grasslands, and the bobolinks were gathering, and all the redwings were starting to kind of form their flocks. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're already thinking about migration, and fall migration is actually here. Shorebirds are moving. And so if you go to indianaaudubon.org/events, you can see all the different field trips and activities that we got. We have the biggest one kicking off, of course, we'll be talking a lot about today, is the Hummingbird Migration Celebration, August 10th at our Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary, just east of Indianapolis, again on August 10th. And then we'll be up at the lakefront, some shorebird migration, as well as several other field trips that you can see through September and October. And we'll finally conclude through fall with Project Owlnet. It's hard to believe that we're already starting to think about that and fall migration in owls. So lots of events. Go to our events page, activities, to see some of those, as well as some of the virtual sessions, such as this one that we have going on through the next couple months. I also wanted to mention real briefly the Mumford and Keller, and it is our Mumford and Keller kind of outreach season. So if you're not familiar, Mumford and Keller is our grant and scholarship program. Last year, we gave almost $15,000, and that is in conservation, research, education, scholarships, throughout a variety of categories in not just folks in Indiana, but now this is a grant program that's expanded worldwide, and we have projects in several different countries that we have helped support. And so right now it's our annual appeal to kind of get donations to help us. It's a way to spread and increase our impact. through the great community of conservation that we have that are doing these cool projects, that have these great ideas. And so if you go to indianaaudubon.org/Mumford and Keller, you can read about the grant application process. If you got an idea, you know someone that's got an idea, you have until August 15th, and please support it too. If you got a little bit of extra change, you can kind of chip in towards that. We are trying to get so that we can build that annual program to over $25,000 that we're able to provide towards so many great projects. And you can go to that webpage and learn about some of the past projects that we've done there. And one of them that has had some support is Chasing Melody. And just a quick update, if you haven't heard yet, every single bird in Indiana is tagged. So we have completed all 26 wood thrushes. They have their Modus tags on them, and they are just kind of finishing up their breeding season. And so a few of them are going to be raring to go here in the next couple of weeks. And so we're able to track them with those Modus tags. And if you've adopted one, you can go to that site and actually see where your bird might be traveling as it moves amongst the different maze of Modus tags. And so officially, I believe the number was somewhere around 527 of the original goal of 600 wood thrush throughout the entire range of this bird have been banded this year with those tags. And so an immense amount of data that we'll be able to track those birds in the tropics and see where our Indiana birds go. And stay tuned for later in the fall. We'll be talking about potentially year 2 to be able to double our efforts and get even more information on where our birds are wintering. So just a couple updates I wanted to offer to a lot of our members that have been following along throughout the summer on some of those different programs and activities going on. But let me introduce a couple folks that are with me today, because this month's theme, Ruby-throated Wonders. And one of the things that I've noticed is oftentimes when we do these kind of birding crash courses and introductory to birding programs, I ask folks, what is that bird that really got you into birding? And, we call them the little spark birds, or those spark moments that you had where you saw this bird and it kind of lit that flame that continued on this kind of interest in birds. And I've heard all sorts of different birds over the years. They talk about owls, and blue jays, and sometimes, non-wild birds they made a connection with. You can guess one of the number one birds I hear is hummingbirds. And it seems like every single time there's always going to be somebody that raises their hand and say, hummingbirds was my spark bird. And yet for me, it wasn't. They were always kind of far off in the distance. We have that one different kind, and it took more years of birding before I finally had like an appreciation and kind of this interest in hummingbirds. But I think more people choose hummingbirds, and more people that will say, I'm not a bird watcher either, but you got a hummingbird feeder up, or you're doing something to support hummingbirds. And so with that topic today, I got Lina Rifai, who is the Associate Professor of Vertebrate Biology with Indiana University in Kokomo. And so you do a lot of work specifically with birds and ornithology. And I believe, Lina, you are my favorite Indiana hummingbird bander that we have.
Could it be because I'm the only one?
So, yeah, obviously a very niche skill set that we'll talk about. Yeah, I do believe you are the only Indiana licensed hummingbird bander that we have today. Let me also introduce Karin Anderson. And Karin, she's the owner of Native Plants Unlimited. And that's an Indiana-based family business that's promoting native plants. And Karin, can you introduce yourself and a little bit about Native Plants Unlimited?
Hi, yeah. My name's Karin, and I own the business with my adult children, and we are located currently out at Geist Nursery in Fishers. So it's easy access to Indiana, Indianapolis, and actually all of Indiana. We do 3 different sorts of sales during the year. The first one is in the spring, during the month of May generally, but we've added a bit into June now. That is herbaceous plants. Occasionally we'll have some leftovers from our other sales. But we're starting to carry more supplies that are critical for people's success in their yard. So as we've owned the business for these last 4 years, we've had a lot of questions from customers about, rabbit and deer and just, what do we treat the plant with? Do we treat the plant do you fertilize and so forth. So we've sort of done a lot of research on that, and we have some other things to offer that way. We're just getting ready to gear up for our fall sale, which will be native trees, shrubs, and vines. And then in November, we'll have a bare root sale that will focus on spring ephemerals, those hard to find woodland sort of plants, a lot of shade species. So, and those will come to you, to customers in the mail. And yeah, we also do a lot of books and have a curated collection of books that we have for sale, oftentimes online, but definitely in the winter.
And most importantly, we'll see at the Hummingbird Migration Celebration at Marygrant on August 10th. You guys have lots of like pollinator plants and such that would attract butterflies and hummingbirds, correct?
We're going to be bringing 6 to 7 species, making sure that they actually all get here. We will have seeds, books, and supplies, and love to be talking about hummingbirds.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into more about kind of native landscaping and some of the plants there. I want to start though very basic, just for both you and Lina, is why hummingbirds? Why is it that people love hummingbirds more than it seems like any other group of birds? What are those traits or things as you're talking to folks and Lina, as you're doing hummingbird banding and you see that look on people's face? What is, I think, the number one things that really draw people to hummingbirds?
I would say their size. I mean, they're the size of a bumblebee nearly, and have the attitude of a full-grown T-Rex. So they have not forgotten that they're dinosaurs. And I think the other thing, they just come really close to you, so you can have a feeder right next to you, and they just first yell at you, and then they go feed. So seeing something this small, and yeah, they're pretty amazing as well. I mean, just alone that they migrate thousands of miles every year and come back, and it's fun to watch them. So actually through hummingbirds, I think a lot of people got into native plants. A lot of people who are interested in attracting hummingbirds that talk about native plants, and they really start planting more because they're more interested in what kind of plants they can use that hummingbirds would be on. So I could go on for a few hours if you want to.
Yeah, you're starting to tick off kind of like the traits that we know about hummingbirds, because so many of those traits are so unique amongst other birds, and just being the smallest bird of the world. I had to write this down. A bird the size of a bumblebee, but the attitude of a T-Rex. And so that's a great there. And probably describes a lot of all of our little colibris and different hummingbirds around the world. I'd written down there was like, it's like over like 200 species or something of hummingbirds that you can find all around the world that we see. So there's a lot of different varieties, but for us, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of variety. And as I look at the state list, I see what looks like about 6 kinds of hummingbirds that I could potentially see. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we will see one, but there's, some of those vagrants that come sometimes through Indiana, if we just talk about, but all throughout the range, there's about, depending where we look in the US, I mean, we get some interesting visitors sometimes in the southwest, sorry. But for us, we have, interesting enough, it is one species. I know a lot of people will tell us that they've seen a different looking one. And sometimes I've noticed people think that if they don't have a red, they're a different species. So I sometimes hear, what is the green hummingbird? I'm like, it's the same hummingbird. Or what's the one with the black chin? I'm like, just if you look at it a little bit longer and wait for it to turn a little bit its head, you'll see it's actually red. So there's a lot of interesting things about hummingbirds too, where no matter how long some people have watched them, they're not always aware of that. And that's why I think it's always fun when you do this, like at the Hummingbird Migration Celebration, when we do that talk there, and how people are like, oh, so that's the same one, but I've seen this one. And so it's always fun to see that people realize that not only there's only one species that look different, they're different sizes, the females are larger, and that they, very rarely do we ever see another species in Indiana.
Basically, it sounds like, if you're looking at the state checklist, you're going to see, Rufus hummingbird, you're going to see Anna's hummingbird. But if we get down to brass tacks, it's mainly one. These are kind of vagrants. They're kind of one-time records.
Mhm.
Potential to see them again, but likely. I remember when I was a student sorry, Lina, but at Purdue, one of the ornithology
Oh.
professors, we would, is this maybe a rare bird? And the thing was, think if you're hearing clip clop, think horses, not zebra. And so, if you hear something behind you, it's probably more of the likely species. And so that being ruby-throated hummingbird is kind of the main one that we have here, most kind of widespread distribution, kind of the eastern hummingbird, where you got a lot more that are kind of more out west. So if you're looking at a hummingbird, what makes a ruby-throated hummingbird a ruby-throated hummingbird? And so that's for Lina. And then I want Karin, your customers are coming in. So one of the things I think is interesting is that when these rare hummingbirds come in, it's usually like it's a photo that gets brought into a store, it's posted onto a random Facebook group, because you never know one's going to show up. And so a rarity is not necessarily going to land in some expert that's going to know what this is. And so do both of you guys get shared hummingbird photos? Can you please tell me what this is? And then why is it that everything is a ruby-throated hummingbird? What are those traits that we have?
I'll go first because I have negative information. People do not send us pictures. They'll send us pictures of plants for identification, occasionally a pest or an insect that they come across, but I've never been sent a bird yet at all.
How many of your customers come in and are looking for of the native plants specifically because they want hummingbirds versus butterflies, bees, or other pollinators?
I would say it's high. It's usually butterflies. A lot of times people don't realize that there are a significant number of species that will attract hummingbirds, and it even surprises me still sometimes the kinds of plants that hummingbirds will come in on, because the tubular nature of the flower isn't immediately apparent, like the giant sunflowers are a good example, as each one of those little parts of the head that produce a seed is a little tubular flower. So they'll get in there for multiple reasons though too, because everybody thinks just assumes that they just need the nectar, and in fact that they lots of different insects and they need lots of other types of food. If you look very carefully at say a sunflower head or something like that, there are a lot of little gnats and bugs and things inside that flower head that they're in there after.
That would probably explain why I was going up this staircase up on the lakefront this morning, and there were all these spider webs kind of all clinging to it, and where no one's been touching. And as I was going all the way up to the top, I could see this looked like a female hummingbird just kind of hovering. And so I
Wow.
assumed that she was looking for insects and bugs.
Yeah. Well, actually, sorry, go ahead, Karin. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sure.
Yeah, they also use spider webs to build their nests with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you will see them sometimes picking spider webs out of there to it's the glue for everything, basically.
Yep.
So
So
I'm outside, so I lost connection for a moment.
yeah, sometimes I've wondered, talking about traits that people find adorable. I feel like people make a personal connection with the pair that's in their area, and part of the reason is that they come right down and they'll look right in the window at you. They'll come right down in your face and just check you out. But one of the things I've didn't really think about until I saw some kind of post about it, or maybe you and I were talking, Lina, I can't remember, about them coming into the corners of your windows outside, because there are cobwebs and spider webs in there that are gathering off the corner of the outside of your windows. And I was like, that makes all kinds of sense. Yeah, that's why they're coming up and kind of checking things out.
Yes. And yeah, definitely. So I don't know if earlier when I was disconnected, did you guys answer the question you had for me?
Well, you tell me. So do you get sent photos for Hummingbird ID? And then what is it you're usually telling people, here's why it's probably a ruby-throated?
Yeah, I do. I mean, sometimes because it looks like it's black, so the one that could have a black throat is called a black chin. So there's several ways to tell them apart. It's not always easy, but typically I tell people, wait a little bit and see if it is actually red for them to turn. The shape of the wings and the wing length compared to the tail length is different in different species. So I sometimes get down to those details depending on if somebody has those questions, but I always tell people watch it a little bit longer. And the other thing, Karen, I was saying, like some of those that come by, right? People like, well, I have this one hummingbird, it's always the same. The fun thing when you start banding hummingbirds, and I've done this several times, it's not just one hummingbird. So people say, well, I have maybe one or two, and then I sit there for 2 hours and maybe we banded 10 different hummingbirds. So there's more around. They have a certain route that they go along with their feet on. And so, there's just different ones coming through.
Sharing a photo right now there. You can see a male ruby-throated hummingbird, talking about that throat that you were talking about, and how it just kind of shines, and you might get black instead of red.
Yeah, like the bottom right one exactly there in the image.
Oh.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
There's a great example. Now, why is that not a black-chinned hummingbird?
Well, so the shape of the tail, how it's cut in like this, that V is very different with a black chin. It's not quite as extensive. If you can get back to it, and also just you can't see it very well here with the wing length and the tail length because it's a bit in the shade. But there's less. They have a different tail length now. That's also going to be different in the males. But there's a few things here in this image. I would definitely, the tail is very obvious that's not a black chin to me. But if you don't see the tail shape very well, then you can look at some other features. And here very soon, when you see one that doesn't have a red throat, it does not always mean it's the female. It can be a young male or a young female.
So I was just looking at this one, and someone used to tell me it was those young birds had 5 o'clock shadow, a little speckling that you would see in their throat.
Yeah.
So is that both males and females that would possess that?
Now females, older females can have some speckling like that actually, but the young males, sometimes will have a red speckle. That's when Typically, yes, young females don't have as many speckles, but it's not 100%. Yes, that's a perfect one to show.
Yeah,
but you see like these stripes, for example, a lot of females will have that. The only way to confirm with a young one, so what we call hatch year, if it was hatched that year before they get their adult throat, is there's one single feather on their wing that tells us if it's a male or female. We have to look at the shape of it, and that's the only way to confirm 100%.
Yeah.
Go down to the map here really so we can kind of talk about this species. When we say it's kind of an eastern only compared to the other ones, we pull up a map. We'll look at the full range. While that's loading, have you visited this site before? The hummingbirds.net. I think this was used for years. If I'm right, they don't take records on this site anymore, but you kind of see the archives, and it used to be kind of neat is people would report when they would see their first hummingbirds, and so you kind of watch them march up there. And I think eBird is kind of taken that role now, and so probably one of the reasons. But people still can go back to the site, learn about a lot of the hummingbird species and some of the hummingbird events coming up there. And here's our main range.
Yeah, there's a Google map. I don't remember now. I usually Google it, hummingbird migration in the spring, that shows you where the birds are right now, so if they made it to Indiana.
Sure. Okay. So this is just the eBird map there. You can kind of see and that's part of the static map. I really like looking into the Explorer area where you can get more of these kind of maps and see more of the distribution and abundance of where our birds are going. And then the wintering, we can see there throughout southern Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and then they kind of transition through Costa Rica. And once you get to Panama, they kind of fade out there. Looks like we have some wintering birds in Miami too. So they don't all necessarily leave the United States.
Yeah, there's some that overwinter in Florida. Yeah.
I had my feeder out here. Obviously, I put mine out about mid-April when the first ones are starting to arrive, but I haven't seen a lot of hummingbirds, and a lot of folks seem to call me about this time of year too, saying, where are my hummingbirds? I've had it up for, over a month or two, and there are just not that many hummingbirds coming. Do you got an answer for them? Either one of you?
Well, it's different every year is first of all one thing to say. So just it does seem slow to me this year, at least my banding locations that I go to, including I'm sitting on our campus, actually, by the chancellor's house. So, who's also I noticed in this meeting. So, you know, like fix your Wi-Fi. Hi, Dr. Canada. Um, but yeah, so usually it's a bit buzzing a little bit more around this time of the year. Timing is a little bit off as well. I know, and I don't know if she was able to join, but I just at a talk I was giving, somebody told me that a hummingbird building and that builds a nest there, and so we went there and just recently, then she was finished building the nest last Saturday and has 2 eggs in it now. So they're a little bit off with their second brood, but we might still see it picking up around migration. And I don't know, Karin, have you seen anything different maybe with also the plants blooming cycle or anything?
Yeah, we've been at earlier we were about 2 weeks ahead of normal.
Yeah.
I would say it's pretty close to that. It's maybe caught up a little bit to normal, probably closer to 10 days. I've been checking back through my photographs from the last couple of years. And we're definitely ahead on the blooms. We'll talk about this in a little bit when we show different plants that you could plant. Nice, a few of the ones that hummingbirds utilize bloom pretty much continuously for a couple of months, if not all summer. So so it's good to have a diversity, but yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, I think that the timing is off, and that's another a whole topic of discussion around climate change. Is the seasonality is off for not just monarchs and other kind of charismatic species, but for bees, and things are coming and blooming now, and yet the bee species haven't built up their populations yet. So when they really need it, there are going to be fewer blooms. So it's frustrating to watch it happen right in your own yard. So
that's an interesting concept to think about. These as climate change is shifting these plants and these birds of time their arrival oftentimes with these, and if they're disjunct, and so that makes me wonder then is probably because of that naturally variations each year in addition to climate change that we probably see a big bump maybe in May at our feeders as they're first arriving and there's not as much natural food, and then as they go off to kind of breed and more flowers are kind of coming online that we may not see them as much until the young start to kind of really start to crowd the feeders. And that's so it sounds like maybe like you said not one, did you say 2 broods, Lina?
Sorry, say it again.
Did you say 2 broods?
2 birds, what? Sorry.
How many
Oh,
broods a
broods too.
year?
Yes. They typically have 2 a year, so they should be on their second now. And the young should be out right now. So there's also a little bit that dip when the females start feeding the young and don't come quite as often to the feeders sometimes. So, and then once that first brood is out, we see the buzzing around the feeders again. I know I've seen a few young already by my feeders. So, but yeah, right now the first young of the year are already on their own, and the second ones are being made. They're they're in the oven.
What is the time frame from start to finish for a hummingbird brood?
So it takes about 10 days on average from incubation of egg to hatching, then about 2 to 3 weeks before they completely fledge and are their own. So month and a half.
6 weeks.
And I'll be talking more about that when at the Hummingbird Migration Festival, where I'm going to give a talk and talk a little bit more about that and show some pictures. I actually have a new video now of a female that is building her nest, and hopefully I'll get some videos of the babies as well.
Lina, do they build an entire new nest, or do they reuse the nest?
No, very rarely do birds reuse a nest in general, but definitely hummingbirds don't. I got the first nest of that one particular female I've been watching now, building her second. So yeah, they don't, just because of parasites and all of that. It would be not a good idea. And also, the hummingbird nest is about the size of a quarter, the the circle of it, the whole thing.
Mhm.
And it is pretty funny once they have all the young in there, they stretch it out. So they also, the one young I saw in there, exactly, that's the size. And I did bring a hummingbird egg right here.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah,
Hernia.
yeah, there. Well, here's an actual hummingbird
Ah,
egg.
there we
So
go.
it's about the same size, right? They think they're this size, but they're actually this size.
So when I
Um,
hear jelly bean's probably too big for a comparison.
yeah, a Tic Tac is more the size of it, a Tic Tac.
Wow.
And yeah, but yeah, when the young are in there, it changes from being round to an oval shape to stretch out that nest, and I don't think it would be very usable after they leave as well.
Average egg count?
2 eggs per brood, and sometimes both make it, sometimes one, but that's the maximum. And when we banned hummingbirds, you can blow in their belly and you can actually see when there's a little tic tac in the female that's soon going to be laid. So you can actually
Oh,
see the egg in
geez.
her.
Oh, wow. In my birding career, 30 some years, I have seen lots of robin nests, chipping sparrow nests. I've seen some good wood thrush nests now. Um, I have seen 2 hummingbird nests in the wild, and I have found 0 of them. Yeah, so they are hard to
Yes.
find. Where would you find them?
Anywhere from 3 feet up to, well, I'd have to think a meter, sorry, 1 meter to 30 meters up. So, and they're very small, obviously being this small, and they decorate the outside with whatever, a lot of times lichens, moss, whatever the tree is also covered in. And they can be bushes, they can be in trees. They're usually in the one part of the tree or bush you wouldn't expect. It's always, I mean, I've also found 0 of them, but I've seen some when people have found them. And they will be on the thinnest branch too, which makes sense, harder for predators to get to. But yeah, this last storm, I got a video of it. Somebody sent me of what the female sitting on the hummingbird nest while the branch is doing this. And she was still there the next morning.
Holding on.
Yeah,
Like the stories of John Muir and the pine tree, during a storm.
yes.
Just holding on for dear life.
But
I
if
actually
you
have a
watch the female, you can sometimes find it, or people have found it. Watch where the female goes after she feeds.
Mhm.
If you get lucky, you might see her go in a nest.
The one was that I saw, someone had saw her go right to a nest. It was right over a hiking trail up the Dunes State Park. And the second one, actually, a lady called me and said, I got a hummingbird, and she's nesting in front of our picture window. This is in Ogden Dunes. And in front of her window, she had a wind chime. And the hummingbird nested on the wind chime and was going back and forth. And there were kids running around. And we said, no way. And so I actually went there with the DNR photographer, and I'm going to share the photo. Here's the photo we took. And you can see it's just a little strip of metal. And then it just had these little chimes that were hanging, and it was no more than 9 inches in front of this gigantic window. And so the family could sit right in there and like literally be inches away and watch her come and go. And as she was feeding them throughout the course of the 6 weeks there, it was a really cool experience to be able to see that. Because that's not a nest location that I would expect to find the hummingbird.
Yeah, they've been found in crazy locations. People have just the lights out outside, for evening lighting on their porch. They've nested on those. As I said, it's the T-Rex personality, not afraid of anything. But yeah, they don't seem to want to nest ever where I'm at, or most hummingbird banders probably will be frustrated with that. And Mary Gray, where we have hundreds of hummingbirds buzzing around the feeders,
Yeah.
I've tried for years to just find one and watch the females. And I know there's hundreds of nests around there, but finding
Mm.
them.
Uh, if you're trying to get hummingbirds, it seems like, there's 2 main ways. One is you got the feeder option, you got the kind of landscaping option. And I got actually just pulled it off of outside and emptied it out. So I got to refill it. Yeah, there you go. So if hummingbird feeders, that seems to be the number one way. And Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary is a great place to see it. As you said, literally hundreds of hummingbirds you're going to see there. And why so many hummingbirds at Mary Gray?
Well, as you were saying, landscape, it's really landscape and feeders, so you can attract them. As Karen was saying earlier, they eat insects. That's their main food. That's the protein source. The sugar water is just the energy source. But um, so they will need all of these things to have a place to breed and feed their young. And we have all of that at Mary Gray. And then, of course, the feeders, if they find a quick and easy and dependable access to clean food, and that's an important thing, of course, having to you want to change it every 2 to 3 days in the summer. And the ratio has to be 1 to 4 because that's the closest. And they've done lots of research on there that they find in the nectar as well of the plants. And
So
hummingbirds
one
know
to
exactly.
four. What is that? 1 to
Sorry,
4.
1 part sugar, 4 parts water. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
And only normal white sugar, not anything else. Don't mix anything else in it, please. The red dye, please don't add that either. That is very bad for them. And I've banded hummingbirds that as they have urine coming out, it's red because they cannot digest it. And you don't have to change the concentration. It's always going to be 1 part sugar, 4 parts water, no matter what point of the year, just like the flowers are for them. Very similar concentration. And yeah, the hummingbirds have an amazing spatial memory. So they know exactly where which plant is and when the nectar is ready again. So to do that cycling and very, and so they remember those feeders too.
Sugar water, no red dye. I got a message once from a lady that thought it may have been good as she made up her hummingbird juice just to put a little dab of whiskey in the mix. And I don't know if it was a sugar thing or what. I suggested not. Was that probably the way to go?
Yes, please do not. That is you're putting poison in for
Can't
them
make it
is
up.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it probably was diluted enough that it didn't affect them, but it will eventually. And hummingbirds, there have been studies done where they found that if the sugar water or whatever they're feeding on is bad, they will come feed on it, but they won't come back. So if you keep on seeing birds, it's other birds. It's not the same ones necessarily.
So maybe she really wanted photos and just like, I need to slow them down or something like that.
Yeah, no, that might speed them up, not slow them down. And the heart speeds 1,200 times a minute. So I wouldn't
100
add
times
anything.
a minute.
Yeah, we come across customers not far too frequently actually who believe that you can leave the sugar solution in there until it's gone. And a lot of these feeders are so big that if you actually do that, you are introducing all kinds of bacteria to them. And there are really sad stories about ones that have come to that. What I think they're pretty good at figuring out what's good and bad, and they will leave things that aren't clean. But also if they are on a limited food source and as there are their food deserts for them, lots of times I think during these drought conditions they're forced to go to feeders. So it's just so important to keep it clean, keep it changed. Another problem is I found personally with feeders that we had that were older, that were made of plastic, have the where the feeder itself is made, it has a seam on it. And in particular, we have a lot of trees around. We have a lot of the black algae, black mold, whatever it is, that gets on your roof and that sort of thing. And it'll get down inside those little seams. It's almost impossible to get them really clean. That stuff. So, and then once your feeder is old enough that it starts, you can't keep it clean, essentially. As soon as you put it back in there, it's growing right away. So we moved over to glass feeders for the last few years. That seemed to help a lot. They're a lot easier to clean and keep clean, and there are no seams in that way for bacteria to hide. So I thought that was a better interim solution, but until we got out our plants. So my personal goal was to ditch the feeders entirely. And this year we were able to do it. My hummingbirds are right in front of me right now. buzzing around. So I sit here and I'm doing my work and I am able to watch them. I'm sure a lot of us do this, but and we had the feeders right out in front of this window. And this year there were enough plants in bloom for long enough that they weren't going to the feeder. They much prefer the plants. I mean,
Yeah.
kidding, right?
Which, as a bander, it's been a bit frustrating because all of the native plants I got mostly from you guys now are really, this is my third year, so they're all blooming, and my hummingbirds are preferring that to my feeders, but I need a feeder to trap them.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
kind of torn. I'm like, maybe I should take away those plants from you guys. Come on.
Little
But
Ziploc
yeah,
bag
keeping
throw
them,
for 'em when it's feeding
yeah,
time.
but keeping them clean, yeah, Karen, that is a good point. It's very important. I see that you cannot wait for it. So these feeders, that Brad and I both showed, we have quite a lot. We also have from Wild Birds Unlimited those, and I have some glass ones. But I actually always have twice as many as I need so that I don't, I can take everything inside, clean it properly while I replace, so I don't have to do it all at once. But also important, do not use any detergents, definitely not your dishwasher. If you do, make sure you rinse them out, especially if they're plastic, over and over and over again. Hummingbirds actually can smell pretty well. They've done some studies with the black gent, and they will also start to avoid those feeders. So if you want to attract them with feeders, yeah.
That's another
And
that glass is good because it rinses clear and clean away easily than does.
I use white vinegar is a good way to clean things without introducing that chemical smell.
You and I both have from a previous caretaker and hummingbird enthusiast at Mary Gray, Amy Wilms. I had been introduced to a couple names. One is like I think it's Dr. JB's and First Nature's another one, and so there's different there's a whole market on hummingbird feeders and such, and we've already heard don't use the dye and such, but the feeders that I learned from Amy that you had too is that this one doesn't have those yellow ports, which are going to attract hornets and wasps to it. And so you really just, you don't need the yellow, just all red's fine. And the other feature on this one that's really nice, if I can get it, is as it unscrews, compared to other feeders, it's got more of the wide mouth. And so that wide mouth is a lot easier to clean. And imagine those thin ones, and you're trying to, run the kind of the pipe cleaner in it to try to get cleaned out. And so this one and this part also completely opens. And so it's a good one to have. It's easy to clean and keeps out some of the other insects. And looks like the same one you got too, Lina.
Yeah, I have this is a Walmart $5 one. So but
they
we
use
have
the
different
same
ones.
features.
Yeah, it also has the slits, so you also want to make sure ant moats, and that's one other thing. Don't use ant moats so if you want to keep ants out that have that Vaseline or that oily stuff on there, even if it says it's bird safe, it's not about the bird potentially eating it, it's about it getting on their feathers, which can, especially with hummingbird, that's important. So I don't know if you guys will be able to see, but there with the hummingbird feeders, can you see the feeders back there?
Yeah, in the distance.
So yeah, there's ant moats, and also the little roofs can help a lot if you have an issue. So we have a tree on top of our feeders. And so that keeps the ants out too. And we just, because you don't want them in there, and that's another thing why it's important to check your hummingbird feeders regularly. If they get in, you need to clean them, because there have been instances I've seen, I think it was on YouTube and Instagram, I've seen some instances where the ants, especially the larger, they will bite onto the tongue as the hummingbird is feeding, and then the hummingbird's tongue is stuck in the feeder, and that's not a fun thing to get to.
I don't imagine.
So
that's a story to tell. I was feeding and an ant bit my tongue.
I did. One of the hummingbirds last year, a bandit had a head of an ant embedded in her foot. So, yeah, I think the hummingbird won that fight, but that was, I was like, what is this big growth on there? And I realized it's the entire head completely with the biting parts of the ant embedded in the hummingbird's foot.
Wow. So you may have hummingbird feeders up. And obviously right now they're starting to come in. You're getting more and more of them coming out. You're keeping them clean. You're not using the red dye. And then you want to up your game. You want them nesting on your property. You want them to have more opportunities. And that's where you're going to go to Native Plants Unlimited and say, hey, I need plants for hummingbirds. What are those plants? And I think I got some images I'm going to share as well. Or there we go.
Yeah.
Mhm. Karen, what would you recommend?
Oh, can you play that video?
Yeah, what is this?
So this is my front step, and this is last year. Um, I just happened to be sitting there, and it came up, and I was like slowly put my camera up, and but that's them feeding on a coral honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervirens, and there are some that you can find in the regular nursery trade that is a cultivar. It's called Major Wheeler. It's fine as far as that goes. It was a natural sort of an island population. The problem with Major Wheeler and a lot of cultivars is that they are um, propagated through cuttings. So they're all the same plant. They're very seldom viable as seeds. So, or at least that's what I've been told. That's what I understand. So, ours are all wild type and they are propagated by seed. So that is a good example of one and where to put it. Again, if you want to see the hummingbird out your front window or whatever, and again, we have these right on our front step. So the next picture there is this year's blooms and how big the plant is this year.
Wow. So when I
That
usually think of
so
honeysuckle, I think of bad names like bad, bad, bad. It's honeysuckle, but this is native.
native honeysuckles. Yep. We
Okay.
have multiple different sorts, and this is one. All of the honeysuckles are good for hummingbirds. So
Okay.
So you have coral honeysuckle as well?
this is coral honeysuckle. Yep.
Oh,
That
is that
was it.
okay? I wasn't. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, yeah,
And
that's one of my favorites.
yep, that's the up close. That's what that video was feeding off of those flowers. So these are the trumpet shaped flowers that get all the attention, but there are again a lot of flowers that are actually trumpet shaped, but they don't really appear to be at first glance. You have to look close. So tall ironweed would be another one. And
Oh, okay.
and go through that if you want. Go on to the next. Yep. Vase vine is very hard to find. It's endangered over most of its range. Is a little native clematis. It's very well behaved. We have a couple on our growing together here on the side of our house. That's what that picture is from. Occasionally you'll find them out in the wild, but they are not very common. And we're working on getting them propagated from the seeds in our yard. So I just found out that we will have yellow twining honeysuckle. It's sort of a different, can't decide whether it wants to be a shrub or a vine, but it's very trainable. We have it on, again, on our garage, on that same sort of heavy trellis. Yeah, we always talk about how they're attracted to blues and reds and pinks. I don't know why that's exactly, everything's evolved together. So, but Royal Catchfly is another fantastic one. Again, it's another one that's endangered across a good chunk of its range.
Mm.
We have those in the spring, but we will also have some at the Hummingbird Festival. We will have coral honeysuckle at the Hummingbird Festival and cardinal flower. Indian pink or woodland pink root is just such a fantastic plant. Actually pretty easy to grow, but it's been really hard for us to find up until this year. We have a couple of different growers now, and we were able to get 150 of those in this year. We were very excited. They sold instantly.
Cardinal flower is one of my favorites as well. And that kind of reminds me, since I know a little bit about cardinal flowers, that it looks like there's different options depending on the different soils that you might have. Because I think of cardinal flowers usually maybe a little more mesic or wetter soil.
Yeah, cardinal flower will take right up to standing water. And that's their preferred habitat. But yeah, that's a good point. So Royal Catchfly generally can take a little bit of shade, but needs dry soil in general and well drained. Indian pinks can take the shade, can take dry, a range of conditions, but they're generally like dappled sun and woodland soil. And cardinal flower, you don't want to put it anywhere past any drier than mesic for sure. So I would say wet mesic is you pretty much need that.
Okay.
And in all of this, all of these things are growing in my yard. And it is very important, as we were talking about the different seasons and climate change, starting to have things bloom in unexpected times and be over by the time the blooming time be over by the time the insects that they need them are actually in great supply. So it's very important to have a diversity in your yard so that there are options. If you really want to keep your birds around, if you want your, bees and pollinators and butterflies to stick around, you need lots and lots of different kinds of plants. So there's always something blooming. Trumpet vine, we worked pretty hard to get. Hopefully we're going to have them this year at the fall sale. But I was just watching our female right now must be in the thick of female hummingbird, must be in the thick of raising babies, because she is just all over these all the time. And it is so fun to watch them. As you can see that the stem comes down and the blooms are on the very tip of the stem. When the hummingbird gets in there, the whole thing bobs up and down. And those blooms are so big that the hummingbird almost disappears inside there. You can just barely see her wings fluttering and her little tail sticking out. But and then the blazing star, the entire blazing star family is good for all the pollinators. There's certain ones that hummingbirds prefer, certain ones that butterflies prefer. But I think generally, if the butterflies like them better, so will the hummingbirds. I find that the Scariosa, the Savannah, is one that's very, very good for both.
Okay.
So yeah, the just a grouping of this color. So wild petunia is a good little understory plant. If you've already got a prairie planting, definitely add these in. You can put them on the edge of your planting as seeds, stick them in on the edge of the planting to get them started, so you can kind of keep an eye on them. But if you don't have these, they're adorably cute, and yeah, they will get in on those. It's harder to see them get on those because generally they're in and under other plants. So you don't see them get in on those quite as often. Downy skullcap, again, I've got that planted right in front of my window here, and it's so much fun to see them come in on that. I would say another one that's really, really neat to watch is, and I don't have this plant on these pictures, is Solomon seal, and the little and then it's another early one that's important for the hummingbirds. The little blooms hang down, they dangle, and so you get to see the hummingbird come up and back, practically turn themselves upside down to get into those blooms.
If somebody has a yard and they're wanting to kind of get going, is that something where Native Plants Unlimited you have some services to kind of consult on what species? There's photos of my yard. Here's what my soil and shade levels are.
Yeah, we do that. But then also on our website, you can sort of, what we encourage customers to do, because there are so many options and so many plants. We have if you go on the menu, it'll say species and guidelines or species and requirements. Get in there, and there are PDFs for spring, fall, and the bare root sale that lay out very easily on a little chart, color-coded chart, and you can just go down through there and say, so the customer needs to go out and understand where their shade is and how that changes with the seasons, because the sun moves around, right? And so some place that you might perceive as being sunny actually isn't suitable, because at the time that it needs the sun, it's actually in the shade of your house or in the shade of a large tree or something like that. So think about where the sun is. Think about go out there with the trowel, dig some little test little holes and see what kind of soil you have, how much sand is in, how much gravel, how much clay. and just kind of get familiar with the physical environment, and then go down through those lists that we have, and you can see, okay, like, does this soil hold water, does this, where's the sun, and all of that sort of thing. So you got to do a little homework first, go down through there and do that, then if you have questions, ask us.
Yeah. Of course, they can go to the Hummingbird Migration Celebration on August 10th. We have about 500 folks attend annually, and one of the first booths you'll see is your tables of royal catchfly and honeysuckle and cardinal flower that you guys will have to be able to consult. And we have a table next door. You can buy your hummingbird feeder too.
We've
And
got cap and a lot of those ones we were looking at, we will have either at the Hummingbird Festival or later at the sales.
I usually get stuck up at the front desk where folks are coming in answering a lot of questions, and I hear stories each year. Is like, I got to hold and let go a hummingbird. Lina, is that true?
Yeah, hold not so much, but to let it go. I put it on their hand, so you do have to handle them very differently.
That's in the
But yeah,
banding
no,
process, right?
and if you're lucky, yeah, that's the banding process. And if you're lucky, you might, depending how it goes, you get to feel the heartbeat of a hummingbird, which is more like a vibration than a beating.
And why are you banding, and what are we learning?
To be able to know more about birds in general, but to know more about them so we know how to protect them, we need to understand them better. So things like, do they come back to the same location? And we learned that, for example, at Mary Gray, was it 2 years ago, we banded, we recaptured the oldest female, at least recorded in Indiana. She was at least 8 years old. She could have been older. She was a full grown adult when we first banded her. So we find out that they come back every single year to the same location. Females, we find out the age between males, females, that there's a difference, how old they can get. We, migration information. Now, we just did the wood thrushes. I can't wait to put those transmitters on hummingbirds. We're very close to getting transmitters that will be small enough and light enough for hummingbirds. But yeah, there's just a lot of important information that we can get and from studying them. So that's why we band them. And it's always great to share with people, because sometimes that's where people get their little spark to try and do something. Like, how can I get those in my yard?
Yeah. Here's the size of my band. So what's a hummingbird band look like?
And I just realized that I left it by my car, which is over there. It's so males, the length of the hummingbird band of a male, so the length before even rounded, is 5.4 millimeters. So that's about this much. And the length of a female band is 5.6 millimeters. And I think, let me see if I have that up here. I might have a picture of it. I know I got some pictures ready for this. And yeah, so it's very small, and I need magnification glasses to make sure I can see the tiny little thing to go on a tiny little foot.
And there's numbers on it.
And there's 1 letter and 5 numbers. So other song, when we do songbirds, there's 9 numbers. So I would say that's the social security number. And hummingbirds, you do not have enough space for that. So it's a letter, and we have to actually cut it that make our bands ourselves hummingbird banders, because there's very light and very small material that they can't ship as a band. So
when you're looking at a busy feeder at Mary Gray, you're like, oh my gosh, there's like 20 hummingbirds. But I think what we're learning through banding is, like, at a site like Mary Gray, you probably know the numbers better than I do. It's more than 20 hummingbirds that you're banding in the course of a season, right?
Well, I think the most I've had was within 2 hours, 80, as in different ones without the recaps, has been close to 80.
80
So
hummingbirds.
Yeah, and I think close to 100 when we just counted how many when I have a bigger team with me and we can go through them. So yeah, and my little very pathetic backyard that is not, anything big or it's shared, and there I will band in 2 hours probably 10 to 15 different hummingbirds, and most neighbors will swear to just have 1 female and 1 male. And I'm like, nope, we have more.
Yeah, I was saying that the other day. I was like, oh, there's our female back again, right? And I said, look, she's missing maybe missing a feather right at the collar. And then came back in and I was like, oh, there she is again. And I was like, wait, no, that's not the same bird.
It's amazing,
Yeah.
how many, it's that banding, you wouldn't know it without that banding data.
Yeah,
Good.
and here, if I could share an image here, let me just see if I can do that online right now. Ah. Yeah, there we go. So you can see here, that's just a safety
okay.
pin, and there's a hummingbird band.
It just fits right on those. Wow.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
super
so
tiny.
yeah, even the pliers to put it on have are specially made by. So far, there's only one person, and you can see this is before it's rounded, and then when we put it on here, there's only one person that we know of right now in North America who's makes these pliers for them. So you can see all the equipment. Oh yeah, and we stuff them in a little pantyhose that where the toes are, that area, we cut it off. And that's where we put them in while we band them so that they stay pretty calm and quiet in there.
And then
Yeah.
when you're done, then you can just take them and just lay them on a hand and look at that.
And then let them go. So there you can see a band on the tiny little
And the
foot.
numbers. So it's probably hard to see a band if you have a banded hummingbird coming to your feeder.
Yes, it is, because yeah, it's actually, if they sit down and you can see their feet a little bit, you can see it sometimes when the little feetsies are dangling down, then you can see it. But yeah, I do refer to them as nuggets. So if anybody comes to them, hopefully a lot of you to the migration celebration, and you hear me talk about nuggets, these are hummingbirds. They're the size of a little chicken nugget, tiny little one.
So yeah, it's the Hummingbird Migration Celebration. This year's date, Saturday, August 10th. That's at Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary, Connersville, about 1 hour east of Indianapolis. You can see hummingbird banding. You can learn all about different ways that you can help and support hummingbirds, and as well as a lot of other activities, a lot of nature events, fishing, beekeeping, you name it, monarchs. There's all kinds of cool things to do. So we invite you to come out there and you can learn about the bird that is the size of a bumblebee and the attitude of a T-Rex at the Hummingbird Migration Celebration. I also want to follow up again with mentioning that Mumford and Keller in our grant program. Please visit indianaaudubon.org/Mumford and Keller. Learn about that in addition to all of our upcoming trips. Lina and Karin, I want to thank you guys for joining us this month for our Hoosier Birders Hour. Lots of cool stuff about hummingbirds. If you have more questions, we didn't answer those, feel free, put them in the Zoom or Facebook, and we will follow up with the video and answer any questions you may have afterwards as you watch it here through the weekend. So thanks again, everyone. Join us for the Hoosier Birders Hour. We'll be back again in August, looking at more fall migration topics. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for inviting us.
Bye. Thank you.
So much to talk about.